Welcome back to Human Biology. Today we're going to be talking about the digestive system. Overview of digestion. Learning outcomes are: state the function of each organ of the gastrointestinal tract, list the accessory organs and name a function for each, describe the structure of the gastrointestinal tract wall. The digestive system is an organ system that receives food and ingests it into nutrient molecules. The digestive system breaks down using water the macromolecules of carbohydrates, fats, proteins into their subunits to absorb nutrients and eliminate waste. Here's a picture showing you the different structures of the digestive system. The salivary glands, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, these are the accessory organs. And then we have the digestive tract organs, the mouth, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, rectum, and anus. Digestion occurs when mouth takes in food. Digestion involves a breakdown of larger food pieces into smaller pieces so that the enzymes can act on. Mechanical digestion is chewing in the mouth, and chemical digestion involves the using of enzymes to hydrolyze them into smaller subunits. Movement of the GI tract contents along the digestive tract is important to fulfill this function. This movement is aided by contraction of the smooth muscle, also known as peristalsis. Absorption occurs so that the subunits can move across the GI tract walls and enter our cells. Elimination removes any indigestible molecules and discharges them from the body. Walls of the digestive tract. The gastrointestinal tract begins with the mouth and ends with the anus. The lumen is an open area or cavity in the GI tract that is central space for containing food to be digested. The wall of the GI tract has 4 layers. The first layer of the wall is next to the lumen, which is called mucosa, which contains cells that produce and secrete mucus used to protect all layers of the tract. Then we have the submucosal layer, which is a loose connective tissue layer that has blood vessels. Then we have the muscularis layer, made out of 2 layers of smooth muscle, a layer of circular muscle, and a layer of longitudinal muscle. And then the serosal layer, which is the outer lining. This is the part of the peritoneum that anchors it to the cavity. Here's a picture showing you the lumen, mucosa, submucosa, muscularis, and serosal layers. Portions of the mucosa push through other layers. This inflammation causes a condition called diverticulosis. Diverticulitis is when the pouches become infected, and this happens in 10 to 25% of people with diverticulosis. Inflammatory bowel disease, IBD, is a chronic diarrhea, abdominal pain, fever, and weight loss. Another condition is called irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, which involves contraction of the muscularis layer that causes abdominal pain, constipation, and diarrhea, and the underlying causes are not truly known. The mouth, pharynx, and esophagus. Learning outcomes are: identify the structures of the mouth, pharynx, and esophagus and provide a function of each. Explain the series of events involved in swallowing. Summarize the diseases and conditions associated with the mouth, pharynx, and esophagus. The mouth, the oral cavity, receives food and begins the process of mechanical and chemical digestion. It is bounded by the lips and the cheeks. The roof of the mouth forms the hard and soft palates, separated by the nasal cavities from the oral cavity. Here's a picture of the hard palate, soft palate, uvula, tonsil, the molars, premolars, and the canine teeth. The 3 pairs of salivary glands secrete saliva, and they contain salivary amylase that begins the breakdown of carbohydrates, such as starch. There's also lysozyme, which is an antibacterial enzyme, and your tongue, which is covered in taste buds, provides the ability to taste food products and assist in the mechanical breakdown of the food. This then forms a food mass called a bolus to be swallowed. Mechanical digestion begins where teeth chew the food, and the tongue forms a bolus for swallowing. There are different types of teeth used to help process food. Each tooth has a crown and a root. The crown is a part of the tooth above the gum line, and the root is a portion below it. 32 adult teeth and 20 smaller deciduous baby teeth. The anatomy of the teeth is extended to the enamel, which is the extremely hard outer layer, dentin, which is a thick layer of bone-like material, and the pulp, which contains nerves and blood vessels, and then periodontal membranes that anchor the tooth to the jawbone, which is a socket in a joint. Here's a picture showing you the cross-section of the anatomy of a tooth. Dental caries are tooth decay or cavities. It occurs when bacteria metabolize sugars and produces acids that can erode the teeth. This can lead to painful and sometimes damages the nerve. Gingivitis is inflammation of the gums and can spread the periodontal membrane, causing loosening of the tooth. The pharynx is a portion of the digestive tract between the mouth and the esophagus that serves as a passageway for food and for air on the way to trachea. These two tubes are parallel to each other. The trachea is in front of the esophagus, and the esophagus is the muscular tube that leads to the stomach. Swallowing. Once food or drink is pushed far enough into the pharynx, swallowing becomes a reflex action performed involuntarily. During swallowing, food enters the esophagus, which moves the food into the stomach. The saw palate moves back to close off the nasal passages, and the trachea moves up under the epiglottis to cover the glottis. The glottis is an opening to the larynx and the air passage. We do not breathe when we swallow. Here's a picture showing you the swallowing. You can see the glottis covering over the trachea airway, and then the epiglottis, when he swallows, pulls downwards to flap over the top of the trachea. Over here's a picture of peristalsis. You can see the squeezing motion of the food bolus product. Peristalsis is a rhythmic contraction that pushes food along the esophagus and continues in all organs of the digestive tract. A constriction called the lower gastroesophageal sphincter marks the entrance of the esophagus to the stomach. Heartburn is a failure for the sphincter to close properly, and stomach contents move from the stomach back up into the esophagus. Vomiting, when a strong contraction of the abdominal muscles and the diaphragm forces contents of the stomach into the esophagus through the oral cavity. This could be very damaging because of the corrosiveness of the acid. The stomach and small intestine. Learning outcomes are: describe the structure of the stomach and explain its role in digestion. Describe the structure of small intestine, explain its role in digestion. Explain how carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins are processed by small intestine. Stomach. The stomach is a thick-walled J-shaped organ that lies on the left side of the body just below the diaphragm. The stomach stores food, initiates the digestion of the protein, and controls movement of food into the small intestine. While food is in the stomach churns, mixes the food with acidic gastric juices that contain HCl, hydrochloric acid, and pepsin for protein breakdown. There are 3 layers of muscle in the muscularis layer: the circular, longitudinal, and oblique layers. Here's a picture showing you the stomach, the cross-section of the gastric glands, and the churning motion of how the stomach squeezes its food content. The mucosa has deep folds called the ruga, and the mucosa also has gastric pits, which contain gastric glands. These gastric glands can produce gastric juices, which is a composition of pepsin, used to break down proteins, hydrochloric acid, HCl, which is a pH of 2 that can kill most bacteria, and also mucus. Normally, the food sits in the stomach, empties in about 2 to 6 hours. Chyme, which is a mixture of food and gastric juices, is then squeezed down to your small intestine. The pyloric sphincter allows only a small amount of chyme to enter the small intestine at a time. Heartburn. The lining of the esophagus is thinner than the lining of the stomach. So if chyme enters the esophagus and produces a burning sensation, this can be caused by pregnancy or excess fat pushing on the stomach. GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, is a chronic condition of heartburn. Here's a picture showing you that. So when you have the closing of the lower esophageal sphincter, the stomach contents cannot go back up the esophagus. But if there's a lot of squeezing motion that occurs and it can go back up, that can cause heartburn. The small intestine. The small intestine is smaller in diameter, but is the longest organ in the GI tract. The small intestine has 3 regions: the duodenum, the longest and most superior part, the jejunum, the middle part and the shortest part, and the ileum, the most inferior portion. The pancreas contains enzymes that are secreted through a duct into the duodenum. Another duct that brings bile from the liver and gallbladder into the duodenum, and bile helps emulsify fat. Mechanical bile breakdown causes the fat droplets to disperse in the water to expose more of it to lipase. Produced by the pancreas, it hydrolyzes fats into glycerol and fatty acids. Pancreatic amylase, which is produced by the pancreas and secreted into the duodenum, digests carbohydrates. Trypsin, which is produced by pancreas, is secreted into duodenum. That digests the protein, and so does protease, a class of enzymes that break down proteins. The pancreatic juices contain sodium bicarbonate, which helps neutralize the acidic kind. The walls of the small intestine absorb the sugar, amino acid, glycerol, and fatty acids that are products of digestion. They have these finger-like projections called villi, where nutrient molecules are absorbed into the cardiovascular and lymphatic systems. The lymphatic capillary in a villus is called a lacteal. It gives a fuzzy brush border-like look and contains these brush border enzymes that complete digestion. Here's a picture showing you that. Intestinal lining, a section of the intestinal wall, one single villi, and then you can see over here how they expand to like a hair-like projections, and then the microvilli on top of the villus. Nutrients are absorbed into the villi, which contain blood capillaries and small lymphatic capillaries called lacteal. Monosaccharides and amino acids enter the blood capillaries of the villus, whereas glycerol and fatty acids form lipoproteins called chylomicrons, which then enter the lacteal. After nutrients are absorbed, they are eventually carried to all cells of the body via the blood. Here's a picture of showing you how the transport and absorption occurs. Carbohydrates get broken down by pancreatic amylase and then maltase of glucose. Glucose goes through the cell and absorbed into the blood capillary. The proteins are modified by trypsin and peptidases down to amino acids, and they go through also into the cell. And then the bile salts mix in with the fat globules to emulsify the fat and lipase to break that down to fatty acids and monoglycerides, and that gets shifted into chylomicrons into the lacteal. Here's a chart that shows you what the enzymes are, what's produced, and the site of action, as well as the function. The first table shows you the list of carbohydrate digestion enzymes. The second chart shows you protein digestion enzymes. And the third and fourth shows you fat and nucleic acid breakdown. Lactose intolerance is when lactose intolerance. Lactose is a primary sugar in milk. And some people are not able to digest lactose because they're missing an enzyme lactase. Lactose intolerance is characterized by diarrhea, gas, bloating, and abdominal cramps after consuming milk or dairy products. A dietary supplement could be helped and used to prevent some of these symptoms. Celiac disease is a result of autoimmune response against a protein called gluten. Grains such as wheat, barley, rye contain gluten, and people with celiac disease experience abdominal discomfort and diarrhea from the inflammatory responses of the small intestine that can damage the villi and microvilli. Gluten sensitivity is a less severe condition in which some symptoms may be the same, but damage to villi may not be present. Those without celiac disease or sensitivity will receive no benefit from a gluten-free diet. The accessory organs and regulation of secretion. Learning outcomes are: explain the function of the pancreas, liver, and gallbladder during digestion. List the secretions of the pancreas, liver, and gallbladder, and summarize how secretions of the accessory organs are regulated. The accessory organs. The pancreas produces pancreatic juice, which contains digestive enzymes to break down carbohydrates via pancreatic amylase, break down proteins via trypsin, and breaks down fats via lipase. The pancreas is also an endocrine gland that secretes the hormone insulin into the blood. The liver is a major metabolic gland that removes poisonous substances from the blood. The pancreas is also an endocrine gland that secretes a hormone insulin into the blood. Type 1 diabetes is when you have not enough insulin, normally diagnosed in childhood. Type 2 diabetes is when the body's cells are insulin resistant, normally occurs in adulthood, and risk factors include obesity, inactivity, and family history. Here's a picture showing you the gallbladder, the liver, the pancreas, and the duodenum. The liver is a major metabolic gland that removes poisonous substances from the blood and detoxifies them. The liver acts on the storage organ for vitamins A, D, E, K, B12, and iron. It is also involved in blood glucose homeostasis. The lobules are the structural functional units of the liver, and the hepatic portal vein brings blood to the liver from the GI tract. The lobules filter this blood, removing any kind of poisonous substances. Some of the functions of the liver include serving as a storage organ for vitamins A, D, E, K, B12, iron, It helps to regulate cholesterol levels and secretes bile. It also helps regulate the blood cholesterol levels by converting some to bile salts, and produces urea after breaking down amino acids. Bile, which contains bile salts, water, cholesterol, and bicarbonate, contains bilirubin, which is a green pigment formed from the breakdown of hemoglobin. The gallbladder is a pear-shaped organ just below the liver, and its job is to store bile. Gallstones are made of stone-like material that can block and cause pain. Hepatitis and cirrhosis are two serious diseases that affect the entire liver and hinder the ability to repair itself. As a result, jaundice is a yellowish tint in the eyes that occurs when bile pigments leak into the blood due to liver ailment. The liver is capable of regeneration except for during liver failure. Hepatitis is inflammation of the liver and has different forms. Hepatitis A is usually acquired from sewage contaminated drinking food and water. B is usually from sexual contact, but also from blood transfusions or contaminated needles. It is more contagious than AIDS virus and spreads in the same way. Vaccines are available for hepatitis A and B. Hepatitis C is usually required via infected blood and can lead to chronic hepatitis and liver cancer and death. Cirrhosis is a chronic disease. First, the liver becomes fatty and then filled with fibrous scar tissue. Often seen in alcoholics due to malnutrition and excessive alcohol toxin that the liver is forced to break down. The liver can regenerate and recover if the rate of regeneration exceeds the rate of damage. During liver failure, there may not be enough time to let the liver heal, so we will need a liver transplantation. The secretions of the digestive juices are controlled by the nervous system and digestive hormones. The parasympathetic nervous system automatically simulates gastric secretion when you look or smell food. The stomach and the duodenum wall produces hormones that regulate digestion, particularly CCK, secretin, and gastrin. A meal rich in proteins causes your stomach to produce a form of gastrin, which increases the secretory activity of the gastric glands. CCK here is shown in purple, and then gastrin shown in blue. Secretin is secreted by duodenum that is released is stimulated by HCl. Cholecystokinin, CCK, is released by the duodenum when proteins and fats are present. This causes the liver to increase production of bile and causes the gallbladder to contract and release the stored bile. These hormones increase the production of pancreatic juices.